This is the most attractive option and the only one that can ultimately be acceptable as a basis for peace. Good faith negotiations can lead to mutually agreeable exchanges of land, perhaps permitting a significant number of Israeli settlers to remain in their present homes near Jerusalem, inside Palestinian territory. One version of this choice was spelled out in the Geneva Initiative. The Geneva Initiative is described in a separate chapter. I was involved in some ways in the preparation of the Geneva Initiative, and I was there and made the keynote speech in Geneva when this initiative was prescribed. But what it does do is work out a compromise between the Palestinians and the Israelis, through which about half of the total Israelis who live now in the West Bank could stay where they are, and the others would withdraw, which would still leave the Palestinians with contiguous, that is a constant area of land over which they could have a united government of Palestinians. And also part of that was the swap of land. Whenever the Palestinians would give up part of the land where the large Jewish settlements are built, then the Israelis would give up an equal amount of land that might lie just west of Gaza or in some parts, relatively uninhabited parts of Israel. So it was a swap of land for land. But the other step was the right of return. This is a very important thing for Palestinians, none of whom would give this up. It's guaranteed in United Nations Resolution 194, the right of Palestinians to return to their homeland, or either to be compensated for their property if they can prove that they actually have title to that property. And the compromise worked out in the Geneva Initiative was, okay, the Palestinians can return, but they can return only to Palestine. They cannot return to Israel, the new nation of Israel, unless the Israelis approve each application for return. But they would still be have available to them some kind of compensation. And the third major issue, I'm summarizing very quickly, is the settlement of the property about who controls or owns East Jerusalem. And this is covered quite extensively throughout the book. But a very good compromise was reached where the holy places would be under the complete control of the Arabs on the one hand and the Jews on the other, including the Wailing Wall and the adjacent land. And then the rest of East Jerusalem would be administered by a joint commission that would take care of housing and schools and garbage collection and water and electricity and that sort of thing. So it was a very good compromise. In my opinion, ultimately, something very close to the Geneva Initiative described in this book is the only avenue to a permanent peace for Israel with justice and peace for the Palestinian neighbors. So the book is deliberately, I wouldn't say controversial, but it's deliberately designed to be provocative. Because, as I said earlier, in Israel and in Europe, these kind of issues are debated every day in the most vehement way, particularly in Israel. Pros and cons, arguing back and forth in the news media, television, radio, the major newspapers. Never in this country do you hear any of these issues proposed publicly by an elected member of the House or the Senate or in the White House or NBC or ABC or CBS, New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times. Never. And I think it's time for Americans to start looking at the facts about the Mideast situation, and only then, and based on the knowledge of the facts, will we ever have a chance to move forward and consummate a peace agreement that would give Israel what they need and what they deserve: permanent peace, recognized by their neighbors and all Arab countries and the rest of the world, and the Palestinians to have their human rights, their land, and a chance to have their own state, side by side, living in peace with the Israeli neighbors. That's what I put in this book.
Mr. President, our first question comes from Kenneth Mayhew of McLean, Virginia.
Okay, Ken.
President Carter,
Yeah.
are you more optimistic or less optimistic about prospects for peace in the Middle East compared to how you felt 25 years ago?
Much less. 25 years ago, when I left the White House, I thought that we had consummated a peace agreement that would be permanent and binding on both sides, because the controversial issues concerning the withdrawal of Israeli police forces and military forces and political forces from the occupied territories, the right of the Palestinians to have their own government, all these things were agreed to by Menachem Begin representing Israel, and he submitted these difficult proposals to his own parliament, and they approved these proposals 85%. So when I left office, involuntarily retired by the 1980 election result, I thought that we had set the groundwork for permanent peace. But so now I feel much less optimistic about the immediate future. And I consider that this administration in Washington now has really failed or defaulted on its obligation to orchestrate peace talks that could prevail. And one reason for that is this. 5 years ago now, there was an agreement with which I didn't really disagree between President Bush and Ariel Sharon, that Arafat was not an acceptable interlocutor or representative of the Palestinian people, although he had been elected in an honest election to be president. So they handpicked a man named Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinians call him Abu Mazen, as, to quote President Bush, the voice of moderation for the Palestinian people. And we all presumed that he would then represent the Palestinians and that good faith peace talks would commence under the general aegis or support of the United States. That never happened for 3 years. So he finally resigned because they would not listen to his voice or let him be involved in peace talks. Then Arafat died, and there was another election, which the Carter Center monitored also, when Abu Abbas was elected president to replace Arafat. So I presume then, and most other people did, now that he's president, he would be the one permitted to negotiate. Not a single day have the Israelis, with the support of the United States, been willing to negotiate directly with the Palestinians. Although Abu Mazen is eager to negotiate and has been since he was first anointed as the prime minister 5 years ago. So that's the quagmire or the cesspool or the dormant state of the peace process. So I'm not enthusiastic about the present state. I'll be briefer with my other answers. But it's a complex question. Yes, go ahead.
Mr. President, thank you. Our next question comes from Clarita Morena of Arlington, Virginia.
Welcome to Northern Virginia,
Very
Mr.
nice,
President.
Clarita.
I'm going to change the topic a little bit. My
Oh,
question's on a
yes.
different topic. I'm part of the baby boom generation,
Yes.
and as part of that generation, I'm really interested in learning what you believe people in my generation can and should contribute and continue to contribute to this country as they age.
Okay, I don't know about aging. Well, I have 3 sons who are, baby boomers, and they are asking the same kind of question. Well, the thing that I would advocate for any citizen, regardless of age, is to get as deeply involved in helping to shape domestic and international affairs as you feel comfortable addressing as a commitment. And if you are a very timid or reticent person and you don't want to speak out or become involved in an organized group, then if you're just eloquent enough to write the English language and you feel deeply about something, just once a month, write a letter to your news medium that's most important to you. If you write the Washington Post, they probably get a lot of letters, and they may not publish them all, but if you keep on writing them and send a copy to a more locally distributed periodical, they might do it. On a show like Diane Rehm, I was on her show today, or on Larry King, where they call in questions. But devise your question in a way that's, to use my favorite word tonight, provocative, but incisive, and say, why don't we talk about this? And you can always contact your local member of Congress and your local member of the U.S. Senate and say, why